Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. Today's topic is 15 ideas for marketers during COVID-19 and will be presented by Jason Therrien. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to go over a few housekeeping items. My name is Adina Magda and I will be the webinar organizer for today. We want to make sure that today's presentation is extremely valuable for you, so we ask that you submit all questions by clicking on the question button in the control panel and typing in your questions. Your questions are only visible to me, and I will collect all submitted questions and we'll do a Q&A with Jason at the end of his presentation. A copy of the presentation will also be emailed to attendees following this webinar. Now for the main event, I would like to introduce Jason Therrien. Jason Therrien is a founder, investor, board member, and civic leader. He started several businesses since 1997, including ThunderTech, an integrated marketing agency that accelerates brands to innovate and win in a connected world. Today, that one-man shop has grown into a 40-plus person agency servicing clients coast to coast and internationally, specializing in brand building, digital transformation, and communication strategies. As the president of ThunderTech, Therrien oversees the growth and expansion of the integrated marketing agency. He works with the account services team to provide strategic planning and counsel for clients. His specialties include developing strategies for integrated and digital marketing, public relations, and communications for a variety of clients ranging from mid-market to Fortune 500 companies. Some of those notable clients include the Football Hall of Fame, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Cleveland Clinic, and PPG Industries. Without further ado, I would now hand it over to Jason.
Well, thank you, Adina. I appreciate you having me on, and I'm looking forward. This is one heck of an interesting topic, obviously because of this interesting time, and I'm looking forward to your questions at the end. So, and I'll say, obviously, a big thank you to Weltman too. Your interest in the topic and bringing ThunderTech on, and I just have an immense amount of respect for those brands that are using this time right now, and any time, but especially this time during COVID to share knowledge, educate each other. So again, kudos to you all attending, taking time out of your day to hopefully learn some things. So let's get the show on the road. All right, so who is this guy talking to you? Again, Adina said, my name is Jason Therrien. I'm president here at ThunderTech. I'm a general marketer by trade. The business was started 21 years ago. So we've now, as a business, gone through 3 crises. Although this is my first pandemic, I'm guessing most of yours too. So we're moving through this, but you know, there's been a lot of lessons, and I'm sure you've all, obviously, either through experience or sharing of knowledge with each other, you know, are starting to see some similarities. There's certainly some unique aspects to this, and I hope some of these 15 ideas today will compel you to either keep on the track you're on or to perhaps add some new tools to your belt. As Adina said, ThunderTech works nationally. We do a little bit outside the United States as well. So we have a decent global view, and then we have 3 offices throughout the Midwest. So we have heavy depth there. We work with a lot of different size organizations. We work with kind of that mighty middle market, and then go up from there. We also do some work downstream, you know, smaller businesses and some startups. So when we were started in the late 90s, we were on the digital side first. So we've seen a lot of digital change, and it has been funny how fast digital religion has been found over the last few months. And we can share some stories about that later. But the important thing to note is that we're a really balanced agency, and my background is really balanced, where even in the late 90s, early 2000s, we started adding offline skill sets. So our headcount here at ThunderTech is about even per department and skill set area. So I'm able to speak into a variety of arenas. And again, hopefully the Q&A, you know, I can dig into some of that further. We also, and I think again, this is where Dean and I have connected, and Weltman and ThunderTech, is that we share a similar passion around education. It's actually one of our 4 guiding principles. And I'm going to put this address on a couple of topics later, but there's dozens of articles there that are specific to the COVID-19 response. Because some of the search engines, because some of the social channels have had issues with people scamming with COVID-19. That's why it says response versus COVID-19 in the URL there. So again, just something to keep in mind as you title things there, that there's a lot of policing going on, and that's evolving at an ever faster rate. So again, we'll get into these 15. These 15 are broad. I'm sure you're doing some of them. I'm sure you've thought of many, if not most of them. But at a minimum, I hope that these can be refreshers. If not, like I said, add something new to your pile. So let's start at the top. Number 1. I think this is a fascinating time for anybody in and around marketing, or people that have a marketing mindset. You know, if there's any executives on the call that may not work in the marketing department per se, but have that mindset, is that digital transformation, right, is a very buzzy term. Very large organizations are going through coordinated, if not chaotic, but coordinated evolutions to transform their organizations. Everyone else downstream, you know, it's been a little more organic, certainly efforts to do it. Our piece is that marketers think about the customers and users, and frankly, many audiences, probably more than anyone else in the organization. And that's so critical to make sure that the organization sees that in your role or from your mindset. Because to digitize experience, right, the biggest issue we see is that it's a mindset shift from doing digital to being digital. Doesn't matter the organization, the industry, et cetera, the size, is that when you are digital, when you become more digital and stop just doing it piecemeal, right, you start thinking about how the user really wants to interact with you. Does this need to be mailed? Does this need to be in paper form, et cetera, et cetera? There's just so many ways to become more digital versus just ad hoc project work. All right, number 2, new sales channels. As I understand, this may not appeal or apply to all of you on this call today, but I think the bigger thing, if we take this up a couple different levels, is that because, again, per that first point, you know the audience so much better. You should have more data or access to that data about your audiences. You should understand where their buying behavior is shifting. You're typically studying the competition more. And again, you have that audience understanding. So this is really about where can we deliver what we do for a living and how. And many times it's the same thing, it's just in a different format. It's bundling, you know, for convenience, for what, and again, you don't have to be the first to market. There's a lot of folks out there you can probably be borrowing ideas from, but how do you change this up? It's not always Amazon, although that is a big one for anybody in the product realm. And the DTC acronym stands for direct to consumer. So a fancier way of saying e-commerce, but it's, again, the DTC model is that we are all as consumers becoming more comfortable going direct to a brand and not always through intermediaries to get what we want. All right, Content Studio. So Adina and I had worked prior to this, and there's a few topics, including this one, that we're going to dive a little deeper in. So Content Studio, probably most of you are thinking about it. Maybe you're not calling it this, but the gist of a Content Studio, right, is the explosion of digital specifically. Content certainly can be applied in other ways, but when you have the digital first mindset, especially with communication channels, email's one of them, obviously your website, but notably social. Sometimes you may hear it as a social studio, but it's making sure that this is the time, right? This is the time that these assets, these visual and other assets, motion graphics, et cetera, where are they at? How are you planning for them? Working more and more with legal or compliance, as many of you have those types of folks in your organizations, to have guidelines approved prior so that these aren't fire drills when you need to get the message out. And Thunder Tech is such a big fan of COPE. If you've never heard of it, NPR actually coined this term several years ago, and our communications department is a huge fan of it. And all it stands for is create once, publish everywhere. And that's what this infographic's about. So as you've seen with some of these imagery, right, these illustrations we have, they are on our landing pages. They are coming out in a white paper. We're starting to use them in video. They are on our social posts, and they're obviously in this presentation. So we designed that once, and now we're utilizing it many times. And that is the real big takeaway there with having a content studio kind of mindset. The next one is owned audiences, right? These are things you're already thinking about, but during COVID, the idea of this, because, and again, depending on where you're at in the country, how this is being accepted both by mandates or by cultural acceptance, we can't be in front of our audiences as we used to, and certainly we can't be in front of them as easily as we used to. So where else are they? These are the natural ones: your email lists, your mail lists, your social channels. Some of these are owned outright, some of these are shared, like social, right? I think most understand that we're buying, we're renting land on Mr. Zuckerberg's farm, and he controls it, obviously. So we say, listen, you should play in that space, but you should also direct them back to owned properties, because as you all know, that algorithm will keep changing. But at the end of the day, it makes it a heck of a lot more efficient than buying that audience, than constantly going out and advertising to it. And right now it is more efficient because you can't be in front as often as you could perhaps pre-COVID. Oh, this is a real personal one for me, because I was trying so hard in the spring and early summer to get out there and really support a lot of my favorite local restaurants and other haunts with takeout, etc. And this, though, as we kept looking at clients, this applies to everybody out there, large and small. Do the audit if you haven't already. And frankly, you need to bake that into your annual marketing plans. How often are you going in, doing your own brand searches, but then also looking at any listing sites, the Google business controls, Facebook about pages you probably look at maybe once a year, etc. Are your hours right? It would just hurt me to no end when I wanted takeout, and I'd look it up on my phone, and the restaurant said that they weren't even offering takeout. Well, I knew they were, but how many folks wouldn't have taken that extra step to make the phone call and just moved on, right? We're one click away, and we're much more dependent on this than we used to be. So just a quick audit is really critical on brand pages and third-party resources. Trade shows, right? This may not apply to everybody, but when you talk about it broadly, events, conferences, trade shows, chamber meetings, you name it, right? We are definitely in a constrained time right now. So what are we to do? The alternatives, some of that we've already talked about. One that we're somewhat in this webinar, not quite a virtual trade show, and if anyone's got to experience that, really interesting. It is not the same, but it is an opportunity to, again, set a time on the calendar, have a one-to-one, albeit virtual connection with folks, do demos of product or services. And I would, if you haven't seen or been a part of a virtual trade show yet, find an excuse to try one out, to go as a visitor. And there's some really interesting tools, and that arena is evolving quite rapidly right now. So again, good for you to know what the basics are. But then many of these other areas are about how do you communicate to your audience, because right, a trade show or an event used to be about meeting new prospects, educating current or new audiences, and then certainly connecting with existing. We're seeing a rise in gifting right now. We have some promotional clients that work in the promotional space, and while it's not replacing the the tchotchke boom from trade shows, we are seeing that as a way to keep the brand out there, a way to show appreciation. And again, whatever your culture and your industry needs, right, there are a lot of alternatives. But one of the other big things is stake out that budget. A lot of your organization spent money on events. Where's that event money going to go? Because your competitors are probably divvying it up for some of these reasons too. So to stay competitive, ultimately, we can't all let it just fall to the bottom line. We've got to find other ways to essentially keep going after those goals we had prior. All right, so reworking the sales and marketing relationship. I'm sure there's some virtual eye rolling back there. I can't see you all, but you know what? It's true. Marketing and sales depends on the organization, depends on the size certainly, but it's been two parties that have been reworking their relationships, broadly speaking, for quite some time now. I think COVID is an amazing opportunity to say, listen, if you're not quite there on the journey, let's get there. If you're just beginning or haven't started on that journey, what a great time to emphasize that you begin it together. What this really is about is alignment. How do you get the goals in writing? How do you understand where one side leads and one side supports all throughout the funnel? And then understanding what success looks like each side of the funnel. This was a McKinsey chart that, again, it's aging. It was in the spring. But as you can see on the right-hand side, it was a 2x change in expectation that digital sales enablement would be needed, right? Most sales organizations or sales silos aren't digital natives. Most, use marketing as sales support, not necessarily as a lead-in. So again, it's time for more organizations to figure this out, and frankly, you're going to find a lot more success faster. Client retention. So this is the my numbers are right. This is the 8th one, so we're almost there, halfway there. Harvard Business Review came out, and this again, you've seen these stats, but they came out a few years ago, and we wrote an article on this on the COVID landing page at Thunder Tech, and they cite that acquiring a new client, depending on the industry, is between 5 to up to 25 times more expensive than retaining an existing client, right? Retaining an existing client doesn't make the headlines. It's never been the sexiest thing as acquiring a new one. It's the hunt. It's all the things that that go into that. It is fun. It is additive. But right now, depending, again, the industry you're in, how do you keep your base stable? How do you work on managing your churn and hopefully pressing your churn rates down? Because right now, an existing client is gold. Some pretty standard points, some reminders. How are you seen? We have marketers that are using some of their marketing budget and transferring it to this. They just need to be top of mind with good messaging and just be out there that their existing clients see them because maybe there isn't an emotional attachment, or maybe it's off season, or whatever the case is. But the second the client forgets about them is the second that the door opens for one of their competitors. How are you being helpful, right? And not in the traditional sense, but sometimes it's a shift to things like this, education, right? Are you starting up new newsletters? Or we have a lot of clients starting to investigate podcasts and obviously webinars like Weltman is doing currently. How are you helpful, right? Because you win a lot of points with existing clients, and yes, there are costs to it, but again, if you can keep them there longer, that's what counts. And retention, right? There's a lot of organizations going through issues right now. Staffing, certainly supply chains for many manufacturers and distributors are big problems. People understand this, and I think that the more transparent you can be in your messaging, the more that people at least understand. And existing clients are obviously more apt to give you benefit of the doubt than perhaps somebody that's brand new. and thinks ill of the first or second impression. Education. All right, so if I haven't beaten this horse enough, it's still there. It's still super important. You've probably heard this phrase too, but I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. The research shows that, you know, if you can take this mindset of you know, helping being the new selling, you're gonna succeed. No one wants to be sold to anymore. So how do you help? You know, depending on the industry, again, up to 70% the decision, the buyer journey is made through research done online, or frankly before the customer actually ends up picking up that phone or filling out that form for you. So how do you make sure you've got content out there? Again, another plug for Cope. It's such an easy one, but it is a way of thinking, and the more that you get folks throughout your organization thinking about it, right? How do you create once but publish everywhere, right? And sometimes this is a tweak. How do you take something like evergreen content, so content that's good, you know, maybe forever, it's the basics of your product or service or industry, but then you make annual or, you know, whatever periodic updates to it to explain, again, how that evergreen knowledge applies today, applies for next season, applies for whatever the purpose is, right? And you've taken one piece of content that you've invested in, and now you're giving it additional life. So you keep tweaking, tweaking, tweaking. COVID-19 topic. So we've done a bunch of these presentations over the spring and summer, and the attitudes towards this keep shifting. I will tell you, I am still amazed by how many folks just don't have it on their site, don't have it in some sort of arena where customers are looking for it. LinkedIn now on your about your brand pages has an ability to fill out a form that explains what COVID may be doing to you. Again, good, bad, or indifferent, how that may be affecting or changing your business, and people aren't taking advantage of it. It is frankly almost tone deaf now to avoid it. We all know it's here. We know it's affecting business in some way, shape, or form. And perhaps you're still conducting business as usual, but something's changed, right? Just be upfront about it. Talk about how it's changed. Longer wait times, shorter wait times. Branches or retail outlets may have different hours. They might be closed, right? There is something that's happening, and put yourself again in the shoes of the many audiences you have and explain it. Help, you know, sales explain it, help operations explain it, help even HR explain it. What's changed with hiring? Okay. So speaking of HR, right, this is one of those sea changes that it was happening pre-COVID. We have seen so many of our clients here at ThunderTech really embrace this, and some have been forced to, because the old ways of especially recruiting, if you're in a arena that has seen a surge, it's just not going to cut it. One of the things that our head of communication loves to talk about is, you know, take your logo off of your job descriptions that you see on your site or wherever you post them, and think about that. Think about it from the user's point of view. You need to sell it, right? You need more marketing in HR's life and less legal. Legal's got a place, right? But legal isn't usually the Hollywood thriller. It's not going to get anybody to run through that wall for you and apply. And it's, again, about building an employer brand. So right now, certainly on the front end with recruiting, there's so many gains to be had by many organizations to tell their story, tell in a more compelling way, to really embrace what kind of brand they are and the type of culture they have, and to get that out there in a really interesting, compelling way. But just like existing clients, don't forget about internal audiences, the employees and partners, team members that you have now. Internal communications has probably ramped up at your organization. I've seen it at most of our clients, and even my own business, it has had to ramp up because we don't see each other as often as we used to, and our routines have been disrupted. We've seen a lot more executives on camera or with recorded messages through audio, and definitely email as well. Some are pros at this. They were born for it. Many are not. This is where marketing can really help. Again, whether it's executives or whether it's through HR, how do you put the best people out there and encourage them to deliver that great message that is just compelling to, again, whichever audience you're speaking with. All right. So video, again, if you're not sold that video is the future, I don't know what will convince you. We are Zoom addicts. Zoom is now this verb, and we have a whole generation of youth growing up on it because they frankly have been forced to. So I know my younger sister, she's graduated college several years ago. She never calls. She only FaceTimes. And it's the strangest thing to me. It's like, it's okay, you can call, but she would rather FaceTime. So there's a generational element that, again, depending on who you're selling to, wants it, frankly, expects it. And then there is this arena where we are just busier and busier and busier, and video has gotten cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and better and easier to deliver via broadband. This is a great time to be testing it if you're not already all in. Webinars, product demonstrations, obviously live opportunities, social, especially social broadcasting that allows for a lot of live opportunities. If you're not ready for live and you don't do live as your first experience with video, but if you're ready to make that leap, try it, right? There's so much to gain from it. Pretty simple one that we've seen a lot more brands doing is it's a great time to do some housekeeping, right? And one of those housekeeping items is certainly your media relations. And generally speaking, not as just a good time to do it because you may have some downtime, but it's also a needed time because so much in media has been changing, downsizing in the last several years, a lot of shakeups because of COVID, especially at local levels and at trade publications. They're just being squeezed. So your beat likely isn't covered by the same reporter or group of reporters that you used to talk to. So this is a great new time to, again, refresh those lists and make sure they are up to date. This one, again, sounds pretty simple, but it's one of those areas that marketing may not have first and foremost on its mind, and you can really be a great internal advocate, again, at the executive level, at the HR partnership level, whoever needs it. But what we've seen is, right, internal teams need to be thanked. They need a break. This has been a tough year for everybody. And what a way to crank it up. Some cultures are very attuned to this. They're comfortable. They celebrate a lot of things together, and God bless them. They probably just need to tweak how they do it, where they do it, when they do it, for more perhaps a remote and digital world. But many organizations, right, this is not necessarily in their muscle memory. I was told once by a client that a culture is defined by what is celebrated. And I thought that was just amazing. I think culture is a very complicated and nuanced phrase. A lot goes into, and marketing is in charge of certain pieces, but certainly not all of it. But the celebration aspect, I do agree with that as one of many components. How can you add to that, right? How can you make it fun? How can you make it interesting? Because there's so many things going on inside of every organization, no matter the size, that just frankly don't get told, get washed over, or what I've seen is worse is that we get used to it. And when we get used to something and we don't point it out as excellent, things can slip. So, we've helped a lot of clients in the customer service fields just recognize great service so that they never take something like that for granted. And certainly during this time, it's a needed element. The last item, number 15, we made it. So 15th idea on working with during COVID. Many of you are probably already doing this. How are you supporting the community and building brand goodwill during this time? I'm not going to tell you to go do it. I think really the thing though we often see is that you're not shining a light on your efforts, and almost to a fault, that these great things happen. And certainly maybe team members understand them, maybe the partner obviously understands it, but you don't take enough credit for it. Minimally, it's something that is in surveys we see with, again, our friends in HR, it is becoming more important that, again, does the business have a purpose beyond just making money? And how do they demonstrate and communicate that purpose? Marketing has a place to play there. How do you help communicate that, right? It might be on your career section, it might be in your internal communications. It certainly has a place, a time and a place appropriately in your external communications. How do you really prove that you're part of the community and do it in a way that is authentic and not just self-serving, right? And there are a lot of these, especially in the nonprofit realm, there are a lot of partners that many for-profit brands have that are hurting very badly right now. And they need not just the financial assistance, but in order to get the financial assistance, many of them need more visibility and awareness. And you as a brand, right, you have strength here. I think our creative director talks a lot about brands can be beacons, and not just for their own for-profit motives, but that they can beacons for whatever they stand for and who they associate with, again, who you partner with. So where can you be of assistance here and use your brand strength that you've likely spent a lot of time, money, resources, energy building up over the years? How do you use it for community benefit as well as your own? It's a tremendous time for that. The world needs a lot more of this, and I know many folks are very open to it, just sometimes don't know where to start. So, all right. With that, I wish you all the best of luck on this path forward. There's so many opportunities, quite frankly. There is so much change. There is so much juggling that you all are doing, and I wish you the best on this path. And Adina, any questions from the audience at this point?
So there are no, thank you, Jason, for the presentation and all the insight you provided for us. There are no questions from the audience at this time. Just a reminder, if you have any last-minute questions, you could type them in the question pane on the screen. If you do not have any questions for Jason during this time, his contact information is on this last slide, and feel free to reach out to him and email him after this if you have any questions about this. But thank you, Jason, for your time today. We really appreciate you partnering with us on this and helping our clients out with their marketing efforts. So with that, this concludes today's webinar. For a list of all our upcoming webinars, please visit our website at www.weltman.com and click on the events section, and you will see the list of our upcoming webinars. So we hope to see you online virtually soon. Thank you so much for attending, and thank you, Jason, for being a part of this. Take care.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.